A crimson tapestry vanishes from a Venetian palazzo, its golden threads hiding a Medici treasure. Who dared to steal it under Hercule Poirot's watchful eyes? A cryptic riddle taunts. Beneath the raven's wing, the rose does sing. It greed, betrayal, or a deeper secret driving the thief. In Venice's shadowed canals, one false move could unravel everything. Can Poirot decode the truth before it sinks forever? Chapter 1. The vanishing heiress. The fog curled through London's streets like a living thing, wrapping the gaslit lamps in a shroud of mystery. It was November 1928, and the city thrummed with secrets, none more tantalizing than the one that drew Hercule Poirot to Ashburn Manor. The grand estate loomed at the edge of Mayfair, its ivy-clad walls and towering gables a testament to old wealth and older grudges. Poirot adjusted his immaculate Homburg hat, his gloved fingers brushing the brim as he stepped from the taxi. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of coal smoke and impending rain. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, trailed behind, his overcoat flapping as he struggled to match Poirot's brisk pace. "Really, Poirot?" Hastings huffed, his breath misting in the chill. "You might have warned me we'd be traipsing through this blasted fog. What's all this about, anyway?" The telegram was vaguer than a politician's promise. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his amusement. "Patience, mon ami. All will be revealed. The matter is one of delicacy, and, I suspect, great intrigue. Lady Evelyn Ashburn has vanished, and we are summoned to unravel the puzzle." Vanished? Hastings' eyebrows shot up. "It's a diamond heiress. Good Lord, that's front-page news." "She's worth a fortune, isn't she, Mr. Preciseman?" Poirot replied, his green eyes gleaming. "And where there is a fortune, there is motive. Come, let us not keep the family waiting." The manor's oak doors groaned open, revealing a cavernous hall lit by a chandelier that glittered like a constellation. The butler, Grimshaw, a gaunt man with eyes like polished flint, bowed stiffly. His black suit was pristine, but Poirot noted the faintest tremble in his hands as he took their coats. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," Grimshaw intoned, his voice smooth as slate. "The family awaits in the drawing-room. Sway, if you please." The drawing-room was a study in opulence, velvet drapes, mahogany paneling, and a roaring fire that cast flickering shadows across portraits of stern-faced Ashburns. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles after a storm has passed but left wreckage in its wake. 4 figures occupied the room, each a study in unease. Lady Beatrice Ashburn, Evelyn's aunt, sat ramrod straight in a high-backed chair. Her silver hair was pinned severely, and her black lace gowns seemed to absorb the light. Her fingers clutched a fan, snapping it open and shut with rhythmic precision. Beside her, Victor Ashburn, Evelyn's cousin, lounged with forced nonchalance, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His tailored suit couldn't hide the pallor of a man who'd seen too many late nights. Lord Reginald Hawthorne, Evelyn's fiancé, paced by the fireplace, his handsome features taut with worry. His cravat was askew, a rare lapse for a man known for his sartorial perfection. Finally, Marcel Dubois, a French artist with a shock of dark curls, leaned against a bookcase, sketching idly on a notepad, his eyes darting to the others. "Mr. Poirot," Beatrice said, her voice sharp as cut glass. "You come highly recommended, though I confess I see no need for theatrics. Evelyn is likely off on one of her whims. She's a flighty girl, always has been." "Flighty, perhaps," Poirot said, his tone mild, but his gaze piercing, but to vanish during a gala attended by half of London's elite. "That, madame, is not a whim. It is a mystery." Hastings coughed, shifting uncomfortably. "When was she last seen?" Reginald stopped pacing, his hands clenching. "Last night, around 10. The gala was in full swing. Evelyn was dazzling, laughing, dancing, the center of attention. I stepped out for a cigar, and when I returned, she was gone. Gone. Poirot's eyebrows arched. From a room filled with guests, most curious, and no one saw her depart. Heavy silence fell. Victor exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes narrowing. She was by the terrace doors, chatting with some diplomat. I assume she stepped out for air. You know how she can't stand being caged. Marcel's pencil paused, and he looked up, his accent soft but deliberate. She seemed preoccupied. I painted her portrait last week, and even then she was distant, as if something weighed on her. Poirot's fingers steepled, his mind already sifting through the fragments. Let us reconstruct the scene. It's a gala. It was here, in the ballroom. Grimshaw, who had lingered by the door, nodded. Sir, the ballroom adjoins the terrace. Miss Evelyn was wearing a silver gown, and her diamond, the Star of Ashburn, was on display, a magnificent stone. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The diamond, worth a king's ransom, Nam. And yet, it is the lady, not the jewel, that is missing. Show me the ballroom, if you please. The ballroom was a vision of grandeur, its parquet floor polished to a mirror sheen, its walls adorned with gilt mirrors and tapestries, its crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, and the terrace doors stood open, letting in a chill that made Hastings shiver. Poirot moved with purpose, his patent leather shoes clicking as he examined the room. Near the terrace, a small table bore the remnants of the gala, a silver tray, a few abandoned glasses, and a shattered champagne flute, its shards glinting in the firelight. Teens, Poirot murmured, crouching to inspect the glass. Broken, but not trampled. This was recent, perhaps deliberate. And here, he pointed to a faint smudge on the tablecloth, barely visible. Lipstick, I think, a shade of crimson. Mademoiselle Evelyn wears such a color. Reginald frowned. No, she favored softer hues. Rose, usually. Interesting, Poirot said, his voice a velvet purr. He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room and the terrace. Was it accessible to all? Grimshaw nodded. The doors were open all evening. Guests wandered freely. Poirot stepped onto the terrace, where stone balustrades overlooked a garden lost in fog. The air was sharp, scented with wet earth and dying roses. He bent low, his eyes catching a glint beneath the wrought iron bench. With a deft movement, he retrieved a sapphire brooch, its intricate design catching the dim light. Monsieur, he whispered, turning it over. This is no trinket. It belongs to Mademoiselle Evelyn Nan. Beatrice, who had followed them, gasped her mother's brooch. She never parted with it. She must have dropped it in a hurry, or left it as a sign, Poirot mused. A message, perhaps, that she departed of her own accord. Hastings frowned. Why leave a gala in the middle of the night, and where would she go? Poirot pocketed the brooch, his expression unreadable. That, mon ami, is what we must discover. Let us return to the drawing room. I have questions for our friends. Back in the drawing room, the tension had thickened. Victor stubbed out his cigarette, his fingers twitching. Found anything, detective? Or are we just chasing shadows? Shadows, Monsieur Victor, often concealed the truth, Poirot replied, settling into a chair. Let us begin with the note. Grimshaw, you found it. Oui. The butler produced a folded paper. Its edges crumpled. 'Twas on Miss Evelyn's vanity this morning, sir. Brought it straight to Lady Beatrice. Poirot unfolded it, revealing a single line in elegant script. Beware the shadow. Cryptic, he said, but deliberate. This is no idle scribble. Who among you knows of a shadow in Mademoiselle Evelyn's life? The room fell silent, but Poirot's eyes caught the flicker of unease in Marcel's gaze, the tightening of Beatrice's jaw, the way Reginald's hands balled into fists. Victor alone seemed unperturbed, lighting another cigarette with a smirk. Evelyn was always dramatic, he said. Probably wrote it herself for attention. Perhaps, Poirot said, but attention from whom? And why vanished to seek it? He rose, his small frame commanding the room. I will examine Mademoiselle Evelyn's quarters. Hastings, you will assist. The rest of you remain here. The little gray cells, they are at work. Evelyn's bedroom was a sanctuary of elegance, with silk drapes and a four-poster bed draped in cream lace. A vanity held a silver brush, a string of pearls, and a vial of rose-scented perfume. Poirot's fingers danced over the items, pausing at a small leather journal. He opened it, revealing pages filled with Evelyn's looping handwriting poetry, musings, and, curiously, a recurring sketch of a rook, its wings spread as if in flight. Hastings, Poirot said, observe this symbol. The rook. It is a chess piece. A strategist, moving with purpose. I wonder if it holds a clue to our heiress's mind. Hastings peered over his shoulder. Looks like doodling to me. Maybe she was bored. Bored. Poirot's tone was sharp. Non, mon, ami. This is intention. Can hear, he tapped. A page where the word shadow appeared, underlined twice. She feared something or someone. A soft creak drew Poirot's attention to the floor. He knelt, pressing a panel near the vanity. It sprang open, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay a single item, a velvet pouch containing a key, its bow engraved with a tiny rook. Aha, Poirot said, holding it to the light. A key to what? I wonder. A door, a safe, or a secret? As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot's mind churned. The sapphire brooch, the broken flute, the cryptic note, the rook symbol, they were pieces of a puzzle, each edge jagged and incomplete. Evelyn's disappearance was no mere whim. It was a performance, staged with care. But was she the playwright, or a pawn in another's game? Mr. Poirot, Beatrice said as they entered. Have you found her? Not yet, madame, Poirot replied, but I have found her traces. She left us a trail, and I intend to follow it. Tell me, who among the guests last night might have wished her harm? Reginald bristled. No one. Evelyn was beloved. Bit headstrong, perhaps, but headstrong, Victor cut in, and reckless. She flaunted that diamond, knowing half the room coveted it. Maybe she crossed the wrong person. Marcel's pencil snapped, the sound sharp in the quiet. She was not reckless, he said softly. She was trapped by expectations, by this family. Beatrice's fan snapped shut. Enough, Marcel? You're an outsider here. Evelyn's choices are not your concern. Poirot's gaze flicked between them, noting every gesture, every inflection. And yet, he said, an outsider often sees what the family cannot. Monsieur Dubois, you will tell me more of her melancholy? And you, Lord Reginald, will explain why you left her side at the critical moment. As for you, Monsieur Victor, your debts, they are known to me. We will discuss them. Us. The room crackled with unspoken accusations. Poirot smiled, a cat among pigeons. The night is young, Mies, Amos, and the truth, it waits in the shadows. We shall find it, together. As the fire cast long shadows across the room, Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of Evelyn's vanishing act. The sapphire brooch, the cryptic note, the rook-catched key. They were not mere clues, but invitations to a game. And Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, was determined to play. Chapter 2. Shadows of Motive. The grand hall of Ravenwood Manor buzzed with the aftershock of the scream that had shattered the masquerade's elegance. Hercule Poirot stood near the grand staircase, his sharp eyes scanning the sea of masked faces. Each one a potential cipher in this unfolding mystery. The unconscious heiress, Clara Wentworth, had been whisked away to a guest room under the care of Dr. Hugh Langston. Her suitor, whose anxious hovering had not escaped Poirot's notice. The cryptic note, The truth hides behind the mask, clutched in Clara's hand, burned in his mind. It was no mere prank. It was a gauntlet thrown at his feet. Poirot adjusted his bow tie, his mind already weaving through the threads of motive. The letter that summoned him here had promised a crime, and now, with Clara's collapse, the game was afoot. But who among these glittering strangers had the audacity to act under his very nose? He moved toward the guest room, his polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. Determined to unravel the first knot of this intricate puzzle, the guest room was a study in opulence, with velvet drapes and a four-poster bed where Clara now rested. Her breathing steady, but her face pale. Dr. Langston stood by her side, his brow furrowed, a stethoscope dangling from his neck. Poirot noted the doctor's hands steady, but with a faint tremor when Clara stirred. A lover's concern, or something more? "Monsieur le docteur," Poirot began, his voice smooth as silk. "How fares Mademoiselle Wentworth?" Langston glanced up, his green eyes flickering behind his half-mask. "She's stable, Monsieur Poirot. A mild sedative in her system, likely from her champagne. She'll wake soon, but she's in no danger now." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A sedative, you say? Most curious for a ball. Okay. And you are certain it was in her drink?" Langston nodded, his jaw tight. "Tested a sample from her glass. It's a common enough compound, but not one you'd find in a casual toast." Poirot's gaze drifted to the bedside table, where the crumpled note lay under a glass paperweight. He lifted it delicately, studying the elegant script. The ink was a deep indigo, not the standard black of a fountain pen. He mused aloud. "It is written with a rare ink, n'est-ce pas? One does not find such a shade in every stationer's shop." Langston hesitated, then shrugged. "I wouldn't know. I'm a doctor, not a calligrapher." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone light but his eyes piercing. "Yet every detail, however small, is a thread in the tapestry of truth." He excused himself, leaving Langston to his vigil, and sought out the host, Lord Reginald Ashford. The man was in the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound tomes and lit by a roaring fire. Ashford, a tall figure with a silver mask and a commanding presence, was pouring brandy for a cluster of nervous guests. His wife, Lady Celeste, stood apart, her golden mask catching the firelight as she sipped her own drink, her eyes distant. "Lord Ashford," Poirot greeted, bowing slightly. "A most unfortunate interruption to your splendid evening. A tea might—" "I have a word." Ashford's smile was tight. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. A dreadful business. Clara's collapse. I trust she's recovering." "She is," Poirot replied, his gaze flicking to Lady Celeste, who turned away. "But I am curious about your guest, Mademoiselle Wentworth. She is known to you?" Ashford nodded. "Her father was a business associate. Clara inherited his fortune. You know, a lovely girl, but perhaps too trusting." "Trusting," Poirot echoed, filing the word away. "And her cousin, Monsieur Victor Wentworth. He is also a guest. We—" Ashford's expression darkened. "Victor?" "Yes, he's here. A bit of a wastrel, I'm afraid. Gambling debts. You know the type." Poirot did know the type. He thanked Ashford and approached Lady Celeste, who was now studying a portrait of a stern-faced ancestor. "Madame," he said softly, "you seem troubled. Is it the incident with Mademoiselle Wentworth?" Her lips parted, then closed. "It's shocking, naturally," she said, her voice low. "Clara is so young, so vibrant. Who would do such a thing?" "A question I intend to answer," Poirot said. "You were near her when she fell, were you not?" Celeste's fingers tightened around her glass. "I was across the room, monsieur. I saw nothing unusual." Poirot inclined his head, noting the slight quiver in her voice. "Merci, madame. I shall not disturb you further." His next stop was the servants' quarters, where he found the head housekeeper, Mrs. Hargrove, a stout woman with sharp eyes. She was overseeing the cleanup of spilled champagne glasses. Her movements brisk. Mrs. Hargrove, Poirot said, "You have the eyes of an eagle, Nan. Tell me, did you see anyone near Mademoiselle Wentworth's glass before her collapse?" Housekeeper paused, her lips pursing. "I don't like to gossip, sir, but I did see Mr. Victor lingering by the refreshment table. He was fidgeting like he was waiting for something. And Lady Celeste, she was there too, earlier, adjusting the flowers. Seemed odd, her doing that herself." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most illuminating. This ink, this deep indigoed. It belonged to the household." Mrs. Hargrove frowned. "The master uses a special ink for his correspondence, keeps it in his study. Not many have access to it," Poirot said, his mind racing. The ink was a clue, a thread tying the note to the Ashford family. But was it Lord Ashford, Lady Celeste, or someone else with access to his study? Back in the grand hall, Poirot observed Victor Wentworth, a lanky man in a black mask, laughing too loudly with a group of young men. His eyes darted toward the guest room door, betraying his nerves. Poirot approached, his demeanor disarming. "Monsieur Wentworth," he said, "you are Mademoiselle Clara's cousin. You must be most distressed by her condition." Victor's laugh faltered. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. Poor Clara. She's always been delicate." Delicate? Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Yet she seemed robust until this evening." "You were near the refreshment table, I understand. Did you notice anything amiss?" Victor's hand went to his pocket, then dropped. "Nothing at all. Just enjoying the party." Poirot smiled thinly. "A party is a fine place to observe, Nan, and to act, perhaps, when eyes are elsewhere." Victor's face paled, but he recovered quickly. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "Perhaps not," Poirot said, stepping back. "God, but the truth, it has a way of revealing itself." Yes. Evening wore on. Poirot's mind churned. The sedative, the note, the ink-call pointed to a calculated act. But why Clara? Her fortune was an obvious motive, but the note suggested something deeper, a secret hidden among the masks. He needed to provoke a reaction, to stir the waters and see what surfaced in a quiet moment. He found Clara's maid, Emily, a timid girl with wide eyes. "Mademoiselle Emily," he said gently, "you are close to your mistress. Has she enemies?" Emily hesitated, then whispered, "She's had letters, sir, anonymous ones, warning her to stay away from Ravenwood. She thought they were a jest." Poirot's pulse quickened. "In these letters, did they use a particular ink?" "Blue, sir, a deep blue, like the sea." The confirmation was a spark in his mind. The ink linked the note to the earlier threats, and the threats to the Ashford household. But he needed more. He decided on a bold move, a calculated risk to flush out the culprit at dinner. As the guests gathered, Poirot requested a moment to speak. The room fell silent, all eyes on the diminutive detective. "Mies, Amos," he began, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "Mademoiselle Wentworth is recovering, and her memory, it begins to return. She recalls a face, a hand, a voice. Soon she will name her attacker." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Victor's fork clattered against his plate. Lady Celeste, eyes narrowed, and Dr. Langston's hand tightened on his glass. Poirot watched them all, his trap set. The lie about Clara's memory was a gambit, but a necessary one. The culprit, believing their secret was at risk, would act perhaps to silence Clara, perhaps to flee. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered by the fireplace, his mind mapping the next steps. The note's ink tied the crime to the Ashfords' study, but who had access? Victor, with his debts, had motive. Lady Celeste, with her icy demeanor, hid something. Dr. Langston's protectiveness could mask guilt. And then there was the household itself, servants with unseen grudges, perhaps. He moved to the study, a locked room Ashford had reluctantly opened for him. The desk was orderly, but a bottle of indigo ink sat prominently, its cap slightly askew. Poirot examined it, noting the faint smudge of a fingerprint. He would need to compare it, but for now it was another thread. The night deepened, and Poirot positioned himself in the corridor near Clara's room, hidden in the shadows. If his trap worked, someone would come. Hours passed, the Manners clocks ticking softly, until a faint creak broke the silence. A figure, cloaked and masked, slipped toward Clara's door, a glint of metal in their hand. Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the dark. "Bonsoir," he said. "You are late for your appointment with Justice." The figure froze, then bolted, but Poirot had anticipated this. He had alerted the footmen who blocked the corridor's end. The figure was cornered, their mask falling to reveal a face Poirot had suspected, but not yet confirmed. The chapter closed with the culprit's identity tantalizingly close. The trap sprung, and Poirot's little gray cells humming with the promise of answers. Chapter 3. Shadows in the garden the morning after the theft of Lady Evelyn. Blackthorn's sapphire brooch dawned with a heavy mist clinging to the grounds of Blackthorn Manor, shrouding the estate in an ethereal veil. Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, stood at his bedroom window, his sharp gray eyes scanning the manicured lawns and labyrinthine hedges below. The Devonshire air was damp, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and blooming roses. But it was not the beauty of the scene that held his attention. It was the mystery, the tantalizing puzzle of the missing heirloom that stirred his little gray cells into action. Poirot adjusted his perfectly knotted tie, his mustache impeccably trimmed, and descended the grand staircase to join the other guests for breakfast. The dining room buzzed with nervous energy, the clink of silverware against porcelain plates punctuating whispered conversations. Lady Evelyn presided at the head of the table, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier, though her composed smile betrayed a flicker of unease. To her right sat Colonel Reginald Hawthorne, his ruddy face set in a scowl as he stabbed at his eggs. Across from him, Celeste Vane, the glamorous actress, sipped her tea with theatrical poise, her emerald eyes darting to the empty space where the brooch's display case had stood the night before. The nervous scholar, Dr. Lionel Creswell, hunched over his plate, his glasses slipping down his nose as he avoided eye contact. Lady Evelyn's nephew, Julian Blackthorne, lounged with a forced nonchalance, his fingers drumming on the tablecloth. "Mies Amos," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the tension like a polished blade. "The events of last night demand our attention. A theft has occurred under this very roof, and Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is revealed." The room fell silent. Colonel Hawthorne cleared his throat. "Damned cheek, stealing from Lady Evelyn. Probably some servant with sticky fingers." Nan, Poirot said, raising a hand. "The matter is not so simple. The brooch was locked in a case, the key in Lady Evelyn's possession. This suggests intention, precision. We must consider all possibilities." Celeste Vane leaned forward, her voice honeyed but sharp. "Surely, Monsieur Poirot, you don't suspect one of us. We're all respectable people here." Poirot's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Respectability, mademoiselle, is a mask that conceals as much as it reveals. I shall investigate every corner of this manor and every heart within it." Dr. Creswell's fork clattered against his plate, drawing a few glances. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding," he stammered, pushing his glasses up. "Perhaps the brooch was misplaced." "Misplaced?" Julian snorted, his dark eyes narrowing. "Sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg doesn't just vanish, Creswell." Lady Evelyn raised a hand, silencing the table. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust you to resolve this discreetly. The brooch is not merely valuable, it is a symbol of my family's legacy. I ask for your diligence." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, you have my word. The truth will be uncovered and the brooch restored." After breakfast, Poirot decided to begin his investigation outdoors, where the mist was beginning to lift, revealing the sprawling gardens in all their splendor. The estate's grounds were a masterpiece of design. Rose beds framed by low boxwood hedges, a marble fountain gurgling at the center, and winding paths that disappeared into a maze of yew trees. Yet something about the garden felt off. Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, told him the answer lay beyond the manor's walls. He donned his overcoat and stepped into the cool morning air, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel path. As he passed the fountain, he noticed Dr. Cresswell lingering near a cluster of hydrangeas, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. The scholar's face was pale, his eyes darting toward the distant greenhouse, a glass structure half hidden by ivy. "Dr. Cresswell," Poirot called, his tone genial but probing. "You admire the flowers, oui? Or is it something else that draws you to this corner of the garden?" Cresswell started, nearly dropping the notebook he clutched. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, I was just taking a walk. The air, you know, it's good for the mind." Poirot tilted his head, studying the man's twitching fingers. "The mind, perhaps, but the eyes, they see more than they admit. Tell me, what did you see last night, after the dinner?" Cresswell hesitated, his atoms apple bobbing. I couldn't sleep. Came out here around midnight just to clear my head, and I thought I saw a figure, cloaked, moving quickly toward the greenhouse. A cloaked figure. Poirot's mustache twitched with interest. "Most intriguing. And you did not follow?" No, Cresswell said hastily. "It was dark, and I didn't want to intrude. I went back inside." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, doctor. You have been most helpful." As Cresswell scurried back toward the manor, Poirot made his way to the greenhouse, his steps deliberate. The structure was old, but well maintained, its glass panes gleaming despite the creeping ivy. The door was locked, a heavy padlock glinting in the morning light. Poirot circled the building, his eyes scanning the ground. There, in the soft earth beneath the window, he found them, footprints, deep, deliberate impressions, too large for Cresswell's slight frame, but too small for the Colonel's heavy boots. Beside them, half buried in the mud, was a torn glove-fine leather, monogrammed with the letter J. Julian Blackthorne, Poirot thought, his mind racing. The nephew's careless demeanor at breakfast now seemed a calculated act. But why the greenhouse? And why leave such an obvious clue? Poirot knelt to examine the footprints more closely. They led from the greenhouse to a narrow path that wound deeper into the garden, toward a copse of ancient oaks. He followed the trail, his senses alert. The path ended at a stone bench where a single rose petal lay, its crimson stark against the gray stone. Poirot picked it up, turning it over in his gloved fingers. A faint scent clung to it, not the natural fragrance of a rose, but something sharper, chemical, chloroform, perhaps. His thoughts were interrupted by a rustling in the bushes. Poirot turned sharply, his hand on his cane. "Who is there?" he called. Celeste Vane emerged, her silk scarf fluttering in the breeze. "Monsieur Poirot, you startled me. I was just admiring the roses, admiring Mademoiselle." Poirot's voice was soft but laced with suspicion, or perhaps searching for something. Celeste laughed, a melodic sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're too clever for me, monsieur. I confess, I was curious about the theft. I thought a walk might clear my head." "And did it?" Poirot asked, watching her closely. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Not yet, but I'm sure you'll find the answers, won't you?" As she glided back toward the manor, Poirot's mind churned. Celeste's presence in the garden was no coincidence. His glove, the footprints, the rose petal leech was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. He returned to the greenhouse, determined to gain entry. The padlock was formidable, but Poirot's keen eyes noticed a faint scratch on the metal, as if someone had tampered with it. He made his way back to the manor to request the key from Lady Evelyn, but as he approached the terrace, he saw Julian Blackthorne pacing near the fountain, his face pale. Poirot approached, his demeanor calm but commanding. "Monsieur Blackthorne," he said, holding up the torn glove. "This was found near the greenhouse. The monogram, it is yours, Nan." Julian froze, his hands clenching. I lost that glove weeks ago. Anyone could have picked it up." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone neutral. "And yet, it appears at the scene of a most curious discovery. Footprints leading to the greenhouse. A cloaked figure seen by Dr. Cresswell. You were in the garden last night, were you not?" Julian's eyes darted to the side. "I was in my room, Poirot. As anyone shall," Poirot replied, his smile polite but unyielding. "And I shall also ask why the greenhouse, a place of such obscurity, draws so much attention." Before Julian could respond, a sudden clap of thunder echoed across the estate. The sky darkened, and fat raindrops began to fall, splattering the gravel paths. Poirot glanced at the greenhouse, its glass walls now streaked with rain. The footprints would soon be washed away, but the glove was safe in his pocket, and the rose petal was tucked into his notebook. He felt a quiet satisfaction. He had uncovered a thread in the tapestry of deceit, even if the full pattern was not yet clear. "Return to the manor, Monsieur Blackthorne," Poirot said. "The storm, it comes, and Hercule Poirot prefers to ponder in comfort." As the rain poured down, Poirot retreated to the manor's library, his mind alive with possibilities. The greenhouse held a secret. He was certain of it. The footprints suggested a deliberate act. The glove, a possible misdirection. Cresswell's story of the cloaked figure was plausible but convenient, and Celeste's appearance in the garden was far too timely. Julian's denial rang hollow. Yet Poirot sensed the young man was not the mastermind of the theft, merely a piece on the board. He sat by the fire, sketching a rough map of the garden in his notebook. The greenhouse, the oaks, the stone bench, they formed a triangle, a deliberate path. The rose petal, laced with a chemical scent, hinted at something more sinister than a simple theft. Was the brooch merely a diversion, or was it the key to a deeper motive? Poirot closed his notebook, his lips curling into a faint smile. The rain might wash away the footprints, but it could not erase the truth. He had taken the first step into the labyrinth, and though the path was treacherous, Hercule Poirot was not a man to falter. The chapter of the garden was closed, but the story of the brooch and the secrets of Blackthorne Manor was far from over. Chapter 4. The alibi that wasn't rain-battered Blackthorne Manor. Its relentless drumming against the leaded windows, weaving a restless rhythm through the night, sighed. The air was thick with suspicion, the guests' faces pale under the flickering glow of the chandelier. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit unruffled despite the hour, stood at the center of the drawing-room, his sharp eyes scanning the assembled company. Eleanor Blackthorne's murder in her locked study had shaken the manor's brittle calm. And now, with a storm trapping them all, Poirot knew the killer was among them. The cryptic note clutched in Eleanor's hand. The truth lies in the shadow of the past had ignited his curiosity. But it was the misplaced fountain pen on her desk that had truly set his little gray cells alight. Now, he turned his attention to the alibis, determined to unravel the lies cloaking the truth. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his mustache twitching as he addressed the room. "Miss, the murder of Lady Eleanor was no act of impulse. It was planned, precise, and executed with audacia. To find the culprit, you must first establish where each of you was at the hour of her death, approximately 10 o'clock last night, when the scream was heard. Let us begin. Victor Blackthorne, Eleanor's son, slouched in an armchair, his dark eyes defiant. I was in the library, reading, alone. Hardly a crime. Poirot. Poirot's gaze lingered on him. The library, you say, Monsieur Victor? A most excellent place to lose oneself in thought. Okay, and yet, I wonder. He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor. What book held your attention so completely? Victor's jaw tightened. Some old volume on estate law. Mother was always nagging me to understand the family's affairs. Indeed, Poirot's tone was light, but his eyes were sharp. Then you will not mind if I examine this book, Nan? Without waiting for a reply, he glided to the library, the guests trailing uneasily behind. The library was a cavernous room, its shelves groaning with leather-bound tomes. Poirot scanned the shelves, his fingers brushing the spines until he paused at a gap. He pulled out a heavy volume on property law, its cover pristine, but for a single torn page dangling like a confession. This, Monsieur Victor, is the book you claim to have read. Poirot held up the damaged page, his voice soft but piercing. A curious thing, this tear suggests haste, perhaps a struggle. Were you truly alone, or did someone interrupt your reading? Victor flushed, his hands clenching. I don't know anything about a tear. Maybe it was already like that. Poirot smiled faintly. Perhaps, but the little gray cells, they do not believe in such convenient accidents. He turned to the others, noting their uneasy glances. Let us continue, Mademoiselle Clara. Where were you at 10 o'clock? Clara, Eleanor's niece, stood near the fireplace, her auburn hair catching the firelight. Her delicate features were composed, but her fingers twisted a silk handkerchief. I was in my room, preparing for bed. Rose, the maid, can confirm it. She brought me tea. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. Okay. And Rose, she is here. He beckoned to the young maid, who hovered at the room's edge, her apron clutched nervously. Mademoiselle Rose, you brought tea to Mademoiselle Clara at 10 o'clock. We? Rose hesitated, her eyes darting to Clara. Why, yes, sir. I brought the tea. She was in her room. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. You hesitate, mademoiselle. Why? Is there something you wish to say? Rose's cheeks reddened. No, sir. It's just, I was busy, is all. Lots of trays to carry last night. Poirot's mustache quivered. Busy, indeed. But we shall return to you, Mademoiselle Rose. For now, let us hear from Colonel Warwick. The colonel, a burly man with a weathered face, stood ramrod straight, his military bearing at odds with the nervous twitch in his eye. I was taking a walk on the grounds, needed air after dinner. The storm hadn't started yet. Poirot raised an eyebrow. A walk, Colonel, at such an hour? Most curious. And where, precisely, did you wander? Near the rose garden, the colonel said gruffly. Didn't go far. Back in time for brandy in the billiard room. Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft as velvet. The rose garden, you say? Then perhaps you can explain, Colonel, why the mud on your boots examined this morning by my good friend Hastings does not match the red clay of the rose garden, but rather the black loam found near the stables. The room stilled. The colonel's face darkened. You're mistaken, Poirot. I didn't go near the stables. Hastings, standing by the window, cleared his throat. I'm afraid not, Colonel. I checked the boots myself. It's black loam, clear as day. A murmur rippled through the guests. Poirot raised a hand for silence. We shall verify this, Colonel. But for now, let us consider another matter. Mademoiselle Rose, you mentioned many trays last night. Did you, perhaps, hear anything unusual while performing your duties? Rose's eyes widened, and she glanced at Clara again. I heard voices, sir, in the corridor near Lady Eleanor's study. Before the scream, Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. Voices, mademoiselle. Can you describe them? Rose swallowed. One was Lady Eleanor's, I'm sure. She sounded angry. The other, I couldn't tell. It was low, like a man's, but muffled. I didn't stay to listen. Had to get back to the kitchen. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. He turned to the group, his expression grave. Argument, Mies, Amos, just before the murder. This is significant. We must now ask, who was with Lady Eleanor, and why did they quarrel? K, the solicitor, Mr. Harrow, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, shifted uncomfortably. This is all speculation, Poirot. You're stirring up trouble with no proof. Poirot's smile was sharp. Proof, Monsieur Harrow. Coup, it is the absence of proof that intrigues me. Alibis, they must be solid, like the foundations of a house. Yours, I believe, is that you were in the billiard room with Dr. Langley. Harrow nodded stiffly. Yes, playing a game. He'll confirm it. Cotta Langley, a quiet man with a scholarly air, adjusted his cuffs. That's correct. We played until nearly 11. Poirot's eyes flicked to the doctor's cuffs, noting a faint ink stain. And yet, doctor, your cuffs suggest you were writing, not playing billiards. Ink. It is a stubborn witness, Nan. Langley blinked, recovering quickly. I was jotting notes earlier. Medical habit. Poirot inclined his head. Of course, but let us return to Mademoiselle Rose. You are certain, mademoiselle, that you heard this argument? Rose nodded, her voice steadier now. Yes, sir. I swear it. Clara stepped forward, her voice sharp. This is ridiculous, Poirot. You're hounding a poor girl who's just doing her job. Why don't you focus on the real clues, like that note in Aunt Eleanor's hand? Poirot turned to her, his expression unreadable. The note, Mademoiselle Clara, is indeed a clue. But it is the human heart that reveals the truth. And yours, I sense, is troubled. Why do you defend Rose so fiercely? Clara's cheeks flushed. She's innocent, that's all. You twisting everything. Poirot held her gaze for a moment, then turned away. We shall see. For now, I suggest, we all retire. It's a storm. It keeps us here, but it also keeps the truth within our grasp. Bonne nuit. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered in the drawing room, his mind racing. The torn page, the mismatched mud, Rose's hesitation, they were threads in a tapestry of deception. He beckoned to Hastings, who approached eagerly. Hastings. Mon ami, there is something amiss with Mademoiselle Rose. She knows more than she says. Tomorrow, we must speak with her alone. Her fear, it is not of guilt, but of something or someone else. Hastings nodded, his brow furrowed. You think she's protecting someone? Poirot, precisement? And that someone, I believe, holds the key to this murder. But we must tread carefully. The killer is watching, and they are clever. The next morning, the storm had softened to a drizzle, but the manor remained cloaked in gloom. Poirot found Rose in the kitchen, polishing silver with trembling hands. He closed the door softly, his presence startling her. Mademoiselle Rose, he began, his voice kind. You are afraid. I see it in your eyes. Tell me, who do you protect? Rose's lips quivered. I don't know what you mean, sir. Poirot sat across from her, his demeanor gentle. You heard the argument. But there is more. You saw something, perhaps, or you know who was with Lady Eleanor. Speak, and I will ensure your safety. Tears welled in Rose's eyes. I can't, sir. They'll hurt me. Poirot leaned closer, his voice a whisper. Who, mademoiselle? Give me a name, and I will protect you. Rose hesitated, then whispered. It was. I don't know his name, but I saw a man leaving the study earlier that evening. He wore a dark coat, and he looked angry. I didn't tell anyone because he saw me, and he said he'd know if I spoke." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A dark coat, you say? And this man? He was not one of the guests." Rose shook her head. "I don't think so, sir. He wasn't at dinner." Poirot patted her hand. "You have done well, mademoiselle. Say nothing of this to anyone. I will handle the rest." He left the kitchen. Poirot's mind churned. A stranger in the manor, unseen by the others, or a guest in disguise. The alibis were crumbling, but the truth remained elusive. He resolved to inspect the study again, certain that another clue awaited Dot in the study. Poirot examined the broken window latch, his fingers tracing the splintered wood. It was deliberate, he realized, not an accident, but a staged distraction. He turned to the desk where the fountain pen still lay, its ink dry but its position deliberate. Nearby, a faint scratch on the floor caught his eye mark too precise to be accidental. He knelt, peering beneath the desk, and found a tiny brass key, half hidden in the rug's fibers. "Aha," he murmured, holding the key to the light. "The key to what, I wonder?" He pocketed it, his thoughts racing. The key, the stranger, the argument, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was not yet clear. As he left the study, he encountered Clara, her face pale. "Poirot, you're relentless," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you looking for now?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The truth, mademoiselle. Always the truth. And I am close, very close." Clara's eyes flickered with something fear, perhaps, or defiance. "Be careful, Poirot. Some truths are better left buried." He watched her go, his mind cataloging her words. The day wore on, with Poirot questioning the other servants, none of whom had seen the man in the dark coat. But the gardener, an old man with a limp, mentioned an odd detail: a cigarette butt found near the stables, brand foreign to the household. Poirot examined the butt, its paper marked with a faint crest. "Curio," he muttered. "This is not English. Perhaps our stranger is not so local." By evening, the guests gathered again, their nerves frayed. Poirot stood before them, the brass key in his hand. "Mies, Amos, a new clue has emerged. A key, a stranger, and a cigarette from afar. The alibis, they crumble like sand. But fear not, Hercule Poirot will find the truth." Rose, standing at the back, met his gaze, her fear replaced by a flicker of trust. Poirot nodded subtly, a silent promise. Aquila was close, and he would not escape. As the guests retired, Poirot sat by the fire, the key glinting in his hand. The stranger, the argument, the torn page, they were threads, and he was weaving them together. Tomorrow he would confront the truth, and the manor's secrets would be laid bare. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Diary. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor, casting a golden haze over the breakfast room where Hercule Poirot sat, his mustache impeccably groomed, his eyes scanning the assembled guests with the precision of a watchmaker. The air was thick with unease, the events of the past days: murdered butler, a poisoned lord, in a locked room conundrum hanging over the table like a storm cloud. Poirot sipped his tisane, noting the subtle tremors in Clara Ashburn's hand as she lifted her teacup. The journalist Harold's sly glances at his notebook. In the botanist, Dr. Linton's distracted, fidgeting with a sprig of parsley on his plate. Madame Valeria, the opera singer, was absent, her chair conspicuously empty. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The butler's death, the torn scrap with Clara's initials, the hidden passage, each clue a thread in a tapestry of deception. But now a new thread had emerged, one that tugged at his curiosity with particular insistence. Clara, the young niece of Lord Ashburn, had approached him before breakfast, her face pale, her voice barely above a whisper. "Monsieur Poirot," she had said, her eyes darting toward the corridor as if expecting eavesdroppers. "I must speak with you. It's about my diary. It's gone, mademoiselle." Poirot had raised an eyebrow, his tone gentle but probing. "A diary is a private thing, Nan. When did you last see it?" "Last night, before the scream," she replied, twisting her fingers. "I kept it in my room, hidden in a drawer. The butler, he knew about it. He threatened to expose what was in it." Threatened. Poirot's eyes had gleamed. In what, pray, was in this diary that warranted such a threat? Clara had hesitated, her lips trembling. "Secrets, Monsieur Poirot. Personal ones. Nothing to do with murder, I swear." Poirot had not pressed her further, sensing her distress was genuine, but her words had ignited a spark in his methodical mind. A diary, a blackmailing butler, and now a disappearance here was a mystery within the mystery, one that demanded his attention. The breakfast room buzzed with strained pleasantries as Poirot set down his cup, his decision made. He would search Clara's room for clues to the diary's fate, but first he needed to gauge the other guests' reactions. Rising, he addressed the table with his characteristic flourish. "Mies Amos," he began, his voice cutting through the murmur. "It appears we are not yet free of secrets in this house. Mademoiselle Clara has informed me of a most curious Laza diary vanished from her room. Perhaps one of you has seen it. A small book, bound in leather. Nan?" The room fell silent. Clara's cheeks flushed, and she stared at her plate. The journalist leaned forward, his pen poised like a predator's claw. "A diary, eh? Full of juicy secrets, I'll bet. Care to share, Miss Ashburn?" Clara's eyes flashed with anger. "It's private, Mr. Harrell, and it's gone. That's all you need to know." Dr. Linton cleared his throat, his fingers still clutching the parsley. "I don't see why a missing diary matters when we've got a murderer among us. Shouldn't we focus on that?" Poirot smiled thinly, his gaze lingering on Linton. "All things are connected, Doctor. A diary may hold the key to motives. And motives, they lead us to the truth." Lord Ashburn recovered from his poisonous scare, but still pale, rapped his cane on the floor. "Enough of this nonsense, Poirot. Get on with finding the killer. My household is falling apart." "Patience, milord," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "The little gray cells, they work in their own time. Now, if you will excuse me, I must investigate this disappearance." Clara's room was on the second floor, a cozy chamber overlooking the manor's sprawling gardens. The walls were adorned with delicate watercolors of flowers, and a four-poster bed stood draped in pale blue silk. Poirot entered with Clara's permission, his eyes sweeping the space for anything amiss. She hovered near the door, her arms crossed, her expression a mix of anxiety and defiance. "It was in the drawer," she said, pointing to a small mahogany writing desk. "I checked this morning, and it was gone. I swear I locked the drawer last night." Poirot knelt before the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the lock. It was intact, no signs of tampering. He opened the drawer, finding only a few pens, a bottle of ink, and a silk scarf. "No forced entry," he murmured. "The thief, they, had a key, or they were clever." He turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you said the butler knew of this diary? Did he have access to your room?" She shook her head. "No, but he was always watching me. He'd linger in the halls, make comments about knowing things. It made my skin crawl." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging her words. He began a methodical search, lifting cushions, tapping walls for hidden compartments, and examining the floorboards for loose planks. As he worked, he spoke, his tone conversational but deliberate. "Diary. Mademoiselle, what secrets? Did it hold that so frightened you? Clara hesitated, then sighed. It's personal, about someone I cared for, someone I lost. The butler thought he could use it to ruin me, but it's not what you think. It's not about the murder. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing as he lifted the edge of a rug. But secrets, they have a way of intertwining, Nan. His fingers brushed against something cool and metallic beneath the desk, a hidden catch. Tay, with a gentle press. A small panel in the desk's underside sprang open, revealing a shallow compartment. Inside was a photograph, creased and faded, showing a young Clara with a man in military uniform, his arm around her. Their smiles were bright, but Clara's eyes in the photo held a hint of sadness. Clara gasped, rushing forward. Where did you find that? Poirot held up the photograph, studying it. A curious place to hide a memory, mademoiselle. Who is this man? Her voice was barely audible. James, my fiancé. He died in the war. The diary, it was about him, my thoughts, my grief. Nothing criminal, I swear. Poirot's expression softened, but his mind remained sharp. And yet, the butler thought this worth blackmailing. Why, I don't know, Clara said, her voice breaking. He never said, exactly. Just hinted he'd tell the family. Make it public. I couldn't bear it. Poirot slipped the photograph into his pocket for safekeeping, his thoughts racing. The diary's disappearance suggested someone else knew its contents, so feared them. But who? And where was it now? The search of the room yielded no further clues, so Poirot turned his attention to the other guests. He found Harrow in the library, scribbling furiously in his notebook. The journalist looked up, his grin sharp as a blade. Found that diary yet, Poirot? Bet it's full of scandal. Perfect for my next column. Poirot tilted his head. Monsieur Harrow, you seem most interested in the secrets of others. Tell me, were you in Mademoiselle Clara's room last night, perhaps? Looking for a story? Harrow's grin faltered. Me. I'm a journalist, not a thief. But I'll admit, I've been poking around. This place is a gold mine of gossip. Saw Clara sneaking about near the butler's quarters before he was killed. Though, suspicious, don't you think? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Suspicious, oui, but not proof. And you, monsieur, what were you doing near the butler's quarters? Harrow shrugged, chasing a lead. Didn't find much, just a lot of locked doors. Poirot noted the evasion, but let it pass for now. If you see this diary, monsieur, you will inform me, Nan. It's maybe more important than you think. Leaving the library, Poirot's attention was drawn to a faint smudge on the corridor floor, a trace of mud. Fresh and damp, leading toward the garden door. His pulse quickened. The diary, he suspected, had not left the manor, but had been hidden somewhere. Accessible, yet concealed. The garden, with its sprawling lawns and dense shrubbery, was a likely hiding place. The Blackthorn Manor gardens were a labyrinth of roses, topiaries, and winding paths, their beauty masking a sense of secrets buried beneath the soil. Poirot followed the muddy trail, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth. The trail led to a stone bench near a fountain where the mud abruptly stopped. He knelt, examining the ground, and noticed a faint disturbance in the soil beneath the bench, patch where the earth had been recently turned, with a handkerchief to protect his hands. Poirot dug carefully, his fingers brushing against something hard. He unearthed a small, leather-bound book, its cover embossed with Clara's initials, the diary. He opened it, flipping through pages filled with Clara's elegant script. But his heart sank as he reached the middle. Several pages had been torn out, their jagged edges a silent accusation. He turned to Clara, who had followed him at a distance, her eyes wide with hope and fear. Is this your diary, mademoiselle? She nodded, tears welling. Yes, but it's ruined. Those pages, they were the most important. Poirot's mind raced. The torn pages suggested the thief had found what they sought. But why leave the diary behind? Was it carelessness or deliberate act to mislead? He scanned the surrounding garden, his gaze settling on a nearby rosebush, its thorns glinting in the sunlight. A tiny scrap of paper clung to a thorn, fluttering in the breeze. He retrieved it, holding it up to the light. It was a fragment of Clara's handwriting. The words barely legible. The curse. Fear is true. Poirot's brow furrowed. Curse. The word echoed in his mind, hinting at a deeper motive, one tied to the Ashburn family's shadowed past. Mademoiselle, he said, turning to Clara. This diary, it speaks of a curse. What did you mean by this? Clara's face paled. It's a family story. My grandfather used to say the Ashburns were cursed, that anyone who inherited the estate would meet a tragic end. I wrote about it, wondering if it was true, especially after James. Poirot nodded, his mind weaving connections. The butler's blackmail, the diary's theft, the torn pages. And now, a family curse siege piece was a note in a symphony of deceit. Someone had taken those pages to protect a secret, or to wield it as a weapon. But who? He paused in the grand hall, his reflection staring back from a gilded mirror. Hercule Poirot, he murmured to himself, you have found the diary, but the truth, it hides in the pages that are gone. The little gray cells, they must work harder still. Chapter 6. The butler's tale. The rain lashed against the tall, arched windows of Blackthorn Manor, each gust rattling the ancient panes as if the storm itself were demanding entry. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, the kind that clung to the velvet drapes and seeped into the polished mahogany of the grand staircase. Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing room, his small, precise hands folded over the silver handle of his walking stick, his eyes sharp as they darted from one face to another. The little gray cells, as he so often called them, were humming with activity, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that grew more intricate with each passing hour. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, stood by the fireplace, his brow furrowed as he tried to keep pace with Poirot's silent deductions. The murder of Victor Langston in the locked library had shaken the household, and the discovery of the hidden passage behind the bookshelf had only deepened the mystery. Clara's tearful confession in the passage the previous night had ruled her out as the killer, but the bloodstain found there pointed to someone with intimate knowledge of the manor's secrets. Now, as the storm trapped them all within these stone walls, Poirot's focus had turned to the one person whose presence was both ubiquitous and invisible. Mr. Grayson, the butler. Grayson stood near the door, his posture impeccable, his black suit pressed to perfection. His face, lined with years of service, betrayed nothing, no flicker of guilt, no hint of unease. Yet, Poirot had noticed the man's hands, how they trembled ever so slightly when questioned about his whereabouts during Victor's murder. It was a detail most would overlook, but to Poirot it was a crack in the facade, a whisper of truth begging to be heard. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding. You have served the Blackthorn family for what is it, 20 years? 22, sir, Grayson replied, his tone as measured as the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. And in all that time, Poirot continued, tilting his head, you have no doubt become the keeper of many secrets. The comings and goings of this house, the whispers behind closed doors, they do not escape a man of your diligence. Grayson's lips tightened, but he nodded. It is my duty to ensure the smooth running of the household, Mr. Poirot. I observe only what is necessary. Necessary, oui, Poirot mused, rising from his chair and pacing slowly, his steps deliberate. But what is necessary when a man is found dead, stabbed with a dagger from this very manor's collection? What is necessary when a passage, hidden for decades, is used to conceal a crime. Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, what did you observe on the night of Victor Langston's murder? The room fell silent, save for the howl of the wind outside. Lady Eleanor, seated on a high-backed chair, clutched her shawl, her eyes fixed on Grayson. Reginald, her son, leaned against the mantel, a cigarette dangling from his fingers, his expression one of bored defiance. Dr. Felix Merrill, the archaeologist, sat stiffly, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair, while Clara, pale and red-eyed, stared at the floor. Grayson cleared his throat. As I told the police, sir, I was in the servants' quarters, preparing the staff's schedules for the week. Mrs. Harrell, the housekeeper, can confirm this. Indeed, she can, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. But schedules, they are prepared with pen and paper, Nan. In paper, it tells stories of its own. Hastings, mon ami, would you be so kind as to fetch the ledger from the butler's pantry? Hastings blinked, caught off guard, but he nodded and hurried out of the room. The others exchanged glances, the tension palpable. Reginald flicked ash into the fireplace, his jaw tight. What's this about, Poirot? Grayson's been with us forever. You think he's mixed up in this? Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. Patience, Monsieur Reginald. The truth, it is like a fine wine, it must be allowed to breathe. Moments later, Hastings returned, carrying a leather-bound ledger, its edges worn from years of use. Poirot took it, flipping through the pages with a practiced eye. This ledger, he said, it records the inventory of Blackthorn Manor's artifacts, does it not? The vases, the statues, the jeweled dagger that ended Monsieur Langston's life. And yet, I find discrepancies. Items listed as present that are nowhere to be found. Items sold, perhaps, without Lady Eleanor's knowledge. Lady Eleanor's head snapped up, her voice sharp. What are you implying, Mr. Poirot? I imply nothing, Madame, Poirot said, his tone smooth. I observe. And what I observe is that someone in this house has been creative with the family's treasures. Monsieur Grayson, would you care to explain why the ledger shows a Mesopotamian statuette sold last month, yet the Manor's display case still lists it as present? Grayson's composure faltered, his hands clasping behind his back. A clerical error, sir. Nothing more. An error. Poirot's mustache twitched. Nan, monsieur, errors are haphazard. This is systematic. 10 artifacts sold over the past year. Their records altered to suggest they remain. And who handles these records? Who has access to the keys of the display cases? You, Monsieur Grayson. The butler's face paled, but he held his ground. I assure you, sir, I have done nothing but serve this family loyally. Loyalty, Poirot said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, is a curious thing. It can bind a man to his duty, or it can blind him to his own misdeeds. Tell me, Grayson, to whom were these artifacts sold, and why? The room held its breath. Clara's eyes widened, and Dr. Marrow's drumming fingers stilled. Reginald stubbed out his cigarette, his gaze darting between Poirot and Grayson. Lady Eleanor rose, her voice trembling. This is outrageous. Grayson, explain yourself at once. Grayson hesitated, then sighed, his shoulders slumping. Very well, he said. I covered for Master Reginald. He has debts, gambling, debts, substantial ones. He came to me last year, desperate. He asked me to arrange the sale of certain artifacts to a dealer in London, a man named Carver. I altered the records to avoid suspicion. It was wrong, but I did it to protect the family's honor. Reginald's face flushed crimson. You bloody fool, he snapped, stepping forward. You think airing my dirty laundry helps anyone? Silence. Reginald, Lady Eleanor's voice cut through the room like a whip. Is this true? Reginald glared at Grayson, then nodded curtly. It's true. I needed the money, but I didn't kill Victor. if that's what you're getting at, Poirot. I was playing cards with the cook when he was stabbed. Ask her. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oh, I shall, monsieur. But first, let us consider the implications. Artifacts sold, records falsified, a murder committed with one such artifact, and a passage, known only to a few, used to stage the crime. This suggests, does it not, that the killer wished to make this appear as a family affair? To point the finger at, say, Monsieur Reginald, with his debts and his temper. Reginald froze. You think I'm being framed? I think, Poirot said, that someone in this house is very clever and very dangerous. The storm outside roared, a flash of lightning illuminating the room. Hastings, ever the barometer of Poirot's mood, shifted uneasily. Poirot, he whispered, do you really think Grayson's the killer? Poirot shook his head slightly. Not yet, mon ami. But he knows more than he tells. And that it is enough for now. The conversation shifted as Poirot turned back to Grayson. Monsieur, you will provide me with the name and address of this carver, and you will show me the records of every sale. If you're innocent of murder, these may yet save you. Grayson nodded, his face ashen. Yes, sir. I'll fetch them at once. As the butler left the room, Poirot turned to the others. This ledger, it is but one piece of the puzzle. The truth lies in the shadows, in the motives we have yet to uncover. But rest assured, Mies, Amos, Hercule Poirot will find it. Chapter closed with the storm's crescendo, the manor's walls seeming to pulse with secrets. Grayson's confession had peeled back a layer of deception, exposing Reginald's crimes and hinting at a larger conspiracy. Yet the question remained, who had used the passage to kill Victor, and why? Poirot's rare slip, his initial trust in Grayson's alibi, had been corrected. But the killer remained at large, their motives hidden in the manor's dark corners. The narrative continued, weaving through the manor's opulent yet oppressive halls. Poirot's investigation deepened, focusing on the ledger's coded entries. He spent hours deciphering them, his monocle glinting in the candlelight as he traced the sales to a shadowy figure in London's underworld. The dealer, Carver, was no mere fence, but a man with ties to international collectors, suggesting the artifact's value went beyond money, perhaps tied to the cursed relic Dr. Moreau had mentioned. Meanwhile, Clara, desperate to clear her name, began her own search, slipping into the manor's attic to find her late uncle's journals. She uncovered references to the Mesopotamian dagger, describing it as a key to a greater treasure. Her discovery, shared with Poirot, added a new dimension. Was Victor killed for what he knew about this treasure? The journals hinted at a map hidden somewhere in the manor. But Clara's search was cut short when a creaking floorboard revealed someone watching her figure, who vanished into the shadows. Reginald, humiliated by Grayson's betrayal, confronted his mother, demanding she sell the manor to settle his debts. Lady Eleanor's refusal sparked a heated argument, overheard by Hastings, who noted her cryptic mention of sacrifices made for the family. This phrase lingered in Poirot's mind, suggesting Eleanor's own secrets. Dr. Moreau, meanwhile, grew increasingly agitated, his expertise in toxicology drawing Poirot's scrutiny. A search of his room revealed a vial of arsenic, though Moreau claimed it was for preserving artifacts. Poirot, unconvinced, noted the vial's label matched the manor's greenhouse supplies, linking it to the cook's potential poisoning detail that would surface in as the storm subsided. Leaving in eerie calm, Poirot stood at the library window, his silhouette framed against the fading lightning. The truth, he murmured to Hastings, is like the storm, mon ami. It rages, it obscures, but in the end, it clears the air. Chapter 7. The actresses masquerade. The air in Ravenwood Manor hung heavy with suspicion, the sort of atmosphere that clung to the velvet drapes and seeped into the polished oak floors. Hercule Poirot, his mustache impeccably trimmed, stood in the grand hall, his keen eyes darting between the guests as they gathered for Clara Vane's impromptu performance. The actress, radiant in a sapphire gown that caught the chandelier's light, had proposed the theatrical display to lift the spirits after the unsettling events of the past days. The defaced book, the mysterious gunshot, the poisoned wine, and the locked room enigma surrounding Lord Grayson's collapse. Poirot, however, suspected her motives ran deeper than mere entertainment. His little gray cells hummed with the certainty that this evening would unveil another thread in the manor's tangled web of deceit. The hall had been transformed into a makeshift stage, with heavy curtains drawn back to reveal a space adorned with gilded candelabras and a single spotlight fashioned from a repurposed lantern. The guest, Lady Eleanor, Dr. Mortimer, Mr. Thorne, and a handful of staffs settled into plush chairs arranged in a semicircle. Grayson himself, still pale from his ordeal in the locked study, sat at the center, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as if bracing for a storm. Clara, with a performer's grace, took her place beneath the spotlight, her smile a mask that Poirot found both captivating and unsettling. Mise, Amos, Poirot murmured to himself, adjusting his lapel. The stage is set, but for what play, I wonder? Clara's performance began with a monologue from The Tempest, her voice weaving Prospero's words with a haunting cadence. The guests leaned forward, entranced, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere. He noted the way Clara's eyes flicked toward the wings, where a shadowed figure, likely a servant, adjusted props. He observed Thorne's fingers drumming on his knee, a nervous tick betraying his polished exterior. Eleanor's lips were pursed, her gaze fixed not on Clara, but on Grayson, who seemed oblivious to her scrutiny. Dr. Mortimer, meanwhile, clutched a glass of water, his knuckles white, as if the memory of the poisoned wine still lingered. The monologue reached its climax, and Clara transitioned to a dramatic scene, now joined by a young footman playing a reluctant Miranda. The prop in her hand, a wooden dagger, painted silver, gleamed as she gestured passionately. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The dagger's edge caught the light in a way that seemed too sharp, too real. His heart quickened. Mon Dieu, he thought. This is no prop. Before he could act, Clara lunged in character, the dagger arcing toward the footman. The boy, unprepared, stumbled back, and the blade missed him by inches, embedding itself in a wooden panel behind. Gasps erupted from the audience. Clara froze, her face draining of color, the dagger quivering in the wood. Poirot was on his feet. In an instant, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Arates, stop this at once," he commanded, striding to the stage. The footman, trembling, backed away, and Clara dropped to her knees, her hands shaking. "Monsieur Poirot, I didn't know," she stammered. "It was supposed to be a prop." Poirot examined the dagger, his gloved fingers tracing its edge. It was indeed real, its blade honed to a lethal point. He turned to the guests, his gaze piercing. "This is no accident," he declared. "Someone has tampered with Mademoiselle Vane's performance, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover the truth." The guests were ushered to the drawing room, where Poirot began his investigation. He questioned the butler, Mr. Hargreaves, a stooped man with a perpetually furrowed brow. Hargreaves insisted the props had been checked that afternoon, the wooden dagger stored in a locked cabinet. "Only the staff had access, sir," he said, his voice quavering. "I swear it was safe when I last saw it." "Safe, you say?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with skepticism. A blade of steel finds its way into the hands of an actress. Monsieur Hargreaves, who prepared the stage. Hargreaves hesitated, glancing at the floor. "It was young Thomas, sir, the underfootman. He's new, a bit careless, but I can't imagine him doing such a thing." Poirot dismissed the butler and turned his attention to the props cabinet, a sturdy oak piece tucked backstage. The lock was intact, but a faint scratch near the keyhole suggested tampering. He knelt, his magnifying glass catching the light, as he studied the marks. It's a subtle hand, he murmured, but not subtle enough for Poirot. Next, he sought out Thomas, a lanky youth with a nervous stammer. The boy swore he'd followed Hargreaves' instructions, placing the wooden dagger in Clara's prop box. "I didn't touch no real knives, sir," he protested. "I'd never." And yet, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm, a real knife found its way to the stage. "Tell me, Thomas, did you see anyone near the props before the performance?" Thomas's eyes darted to the side. "Well, I saw Miss Vane, sir. She was fussing with her costume near the cabinet, but she wouldn't. She's so kind, sir." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Kindness, mon jeune ami, does not preclude motive. You may go." As Thomas scurried off, Poirot's thoughts churned. Clara's reaction to the dagger had seemed genuine, her shock palpable. Yet her presence near the cabinet was no coincidence. He decided to confront her, but first he needed more information. He approached the groundskeeper, old Ben, who had proven observant in past conversations. Ben was polishing a brass lantern in the courtyard, his weathered hands steady despite his age. "Monsieur Ben," Poirot began, "you have the eyes of a hawk, Nan. Did you see anything unusual near the hall this evening?" Ben scratched his chin, his gaze distant. "Sir, saw a figure skulking by the east wing, near the stage door. Cloaked, they were, moving quick. Couldn't see their face, but they carried something shiny in their hand. Thought it odd, but didn't think to report it till now." "Shiny, you say?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Like a dagger, perhaps?" "Could be, sir. Didn't get a good look. But it weren't no lantern, that's for sure." Poirot thanked Ben and returned to the manor, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The cloaked figure, the tempered lock, the real dagger all pointed to a deliberate act. But why target Clara? Is it to harm her, or to disrupt the performance? And so chaos. The answer, he suspected, lay with the actress herself. He found Clara in her room, her sapphire gown discarded for a simple robe, her face pale but composed. She sat by a window, staring at the moonlit gardens. "Sieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "I swear I didn't know about the dagger. Someone wants me dead, don't they?" Poirot settled into a chair, his posture impeccable. "Mademoiselle, the truth is a delicate thing, like a fine crystal. It must be handled with care. Tell me, have you received any threats since arriving at Ravenwood?" Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. "Yes," she admitted at last. "This morning I found a note under my door. Said, 'Leave the manor or you'll regret it.' I thought it was a prank. Cattresses get such things, but after tonight—" "May I see this note?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle but insistent. Clara retrieved it from a drawer, a crumpled slip of paper with jagged handwriting. Poirot studied it. His mind flashed into the defaced book in the library. The script was identical, sharp, angular, as if carved in haste. "This is most illuminating," he said. "Mademoiselle, you must trust Poirot. Is there anything else you have not told me? A secret, perhaps, that makes you a target?" Clara's eyes welled with tears, and for a moment Poirot thought she would deflect. But then she straightened, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You're right, monsieur. Poirot, I haven't been entirely honest. My name isn't Clara Vane. It's Clara Grayson. I'm Lord Grayson's daughter, estranged since childhood. My mother, she was his first love, but he abandoned us. I came here to confront him, to claim my place, but I didn't want anyone to know. Not yet." Poirot leaned back, his mind racing. "Okay, and this secret, Mademoiselle Clara, does anyone else know it?" "Only Dr. Mortimer," she said. "He recognized me from a photograph my mother kept. He promised to keep quiet, but I don't know who else might have guessed." Poirot's thoughts aligned like stars in a constellation. Clara's identity explained the animosity directed at her the dagger, the note, perhaps even the earlier incidents. Someone wanted her gone, but who? Thorn, with his financial schemes. Eleanor, protective of her brother's legacy. Or Mortimer, whose promise of silence might hide darker intentions. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, rising, you have been most brave. Rest now, but stay vigilant. Poirot will ensure your safety. As he left Clara's room, the manor's clacks chimed midnight, their echoes reverberating through the halls. Poirot returned to his own quarters, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The dagger incident was no mere accident. It was a calculated move, tied to the manor's secrets and Clara's hidden lineage. He sat at his desk, sketching a timeline of events, connecting the defaced book, the gunshot, the poisoned wine, and now this near-fatal performance. Each incident, he realized, had disrupted the treasure hunt, drawing attention away from Grayson's true intentions. But what were those intentions? Poirot suspected the hunt was a facade, a means to expose or ensnare someone among the guests. Clara's revelation added a new layer. Her claim to Grayson's estate could threaten the other's ambitions. Kay resolved to investigate the note's handwriting further, comparing it to documents in the library. He also needed to track down the cloaked figure Ben had seen, Thorn, whose nervous demeanor suggested guilt. Chapter 8. The Midnight Revelation. The moon hung low over Ravenwood Manor, casting silver ribbons across the frost-kissed lawns. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the kind that clings to the skin like damp velvet. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand ballroom, his silhouette sharp against the flickering chandelier light. The room, with its gilded mirrors and polished oak floor, seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the drama about to unfold. Tonight, Poirot would unravel the tangled threads of Clara Ashburn's disappearance, and the little gray cells in his mind hummed with purpose. The manor's inhabitants gathered at Poirot's summons, their faces a gallery of unease. Victor Langston, Clara's ambitious fiancé, lounged against a pillar, his jaw tight despite his practiced nonchalance. Beatrice, the envious cousin, clutched a glass of sherry, her eyes darting like a cornered fox. Mr. Harrow, the butler, stood rigid by the door, his usual composure frayed at the edges. The maid, Elsie, hovered near the back, twisting her apron, while Inspector Japp, ever the skeptic, leaned against a velvet curtain, arms crossed, waiting for Poirot to deliver. Mies, Amos, Poirot began, his voice a velvet blade, cutting through the murmurs. Tonight, we approach the heart of this mystery. Clara Ashburn, the heiress of Ravenwood, has vanished, but not without leaving us her whispers. The note, the scarf, the diary, the locket, each a piece of the puzzle. And now, the letter decoded by Poirot reveals a truth most unexpected. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The letter, found in Silas's derelict cottage, had been a cipher of desperation. Written in Clara's elegant hand, it spoke of a plan to flee with Silas, the scarred drifter from her past, to escape the gilded cage of her family's expectations. But the letter also hinted at betrayal, a shadow within the manor that had thwarted her escape. Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting every twitch, every held breath. "Let us begin with the night of the gala," he said, pacing with measured steps. Clara, radiant and restless, danced among you, yet her heart was elsewhere. She planned to leave, to reclaim a life stolen by duty. Someone in this very room knew of her plan and ensured it would fail. Victor straightened, his voice sharp. "This is absurd, Poirot." Clara was upset, yes, but running off with some vagrant? Preposterous. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Is it Monsieur Langston? The heart does not always follow the path of propriety." Clara loved Silas once, and that love, though buried, never died. The locket, engraved with her initials and a date from 6 years past, proves it. Q, monsieur, knew of her restlessness. Did it not threaten your ambitions? Victor's face flushed, but he said nothing. Beatrice, however, could not resist. Clara was always reckless, she snapped, her sherry glass trembling. She'd throw away her fortune for a whim. I warned her, but she wouldn't listen. Poirot turned to her, his gaze piercing. You warned her, Mademoiselle Beatrice, but you also watched her. You admitted to spying on her movements, fearing she would cut you from the inheritance. Tell me, did you see more than you have confessed? Beatrice paled, her lips parting, but no words came. Poirot did not press her yet. Instead, he pivoted to Harrow, whose fingers fidgeted with a silver tray. And you, Monsieur Harrow, the silent sentinel of Ravenwood. You have served this family for decades, yet your loyalty wavers. It's a blood-stained scarf, hidden in the garden ditch you place it there to divert suspicion. Harrow's eyes widened, a bead of sweat glistening on his brow. I found it, sir, and thought it best to remove it. It's protect the family's name. Protect or conceal. Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were still. The scarf belonged to Clara, torn during a struggle. Yet you, who see all, did not report it. Why? The room grew colder, the chandelier's crystals tinkling faintly in the draught. Elsie let out a small sob, and Jap shifted, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. Poirot raised a hand, commanding silence. Let us reconstruct, he said. Clara, intending to flee, prepared a letter for Silas, arranging a rendezvous at the hidden path. She entrusted someone she believed loyal to deliver it, but that trust was betrayed. The letter never reached Silas, and Clara vanished. The question is, who betrayed her? He produced the decoded letter, holding it aloft like a talisman. This letter, written in code, was meant for Silas alone, yet it was found in his cottage, untouched. Someone intercepted it, ensuring Clara's plan would fail. And then, to cover their tracks, they attacked Silas, leaving him unconscious in the woods. A gasp rippled through the room. Victor stepped forward, his voice low. You're saying, Clara's alive, that this was all a ruse? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oui, monsieur. Clara Ashburn is alive, hidden within the walls of this very manor. She did not flee, for she was prevented. But she is clever, and she has left us clues. The diary, the locket, the letter all point to her presence, waiting for rescue. Beatrice dropped her glass, the sherry splashing across the floor. Live. But where? We've searched every inch. Not every inch, mademoiselle. Poirot's voice was soft, almost a whisper. There are places in Ravenwood known only to a few. Places where a desperate soul might hide. Jap stepped forward, his patience thinning. Enough theatrics. Poirot, if she's here, tell us where. Poirot smiled, a rare flicker of triumph. Patience, mon ami. To reveal her now would spoil the trap. The one who betrayed Clara is among us, and they will reveal themselves. For now, know this. Clara is safe, and Poirot will bring her into the light. The room erupted in murmurs, accusations flying like sparks. Victor glared at Beatrice, who snapped at Harrow, who retreated into stony silence. Elsie wept quietly, and Jap muttered about Poirot's blasted riddles. But Poirot stood serene, his mind a whirl of connections. The letter had been the key, its code broken by his knowledge of Clara's favorite poetry, a cipher based on Shakespeare's sonnets. It had revealed not only her plan, but also her fear of betrayal, a fear now confirmed as the clock struck midnight. Poirot clapped his hands. Enough. We will reconvene tomorrow, when Poirot will unveil the final act. Until then, Mies Amos, sleep lightly, for the truth is near. The gathering dispersed, each suspect retreating with their secrets. Poirot lingered, his eyes tracing the ballroom's ornate ceiling. He knew Clara was hidden in a secret cellar, a relic of Ravenwood's smuggling past, accessible only through a concealed panel in the library. But he would not reveal her, yet not until the traitor made their move. As he retired to his room, Poirot's mind replayed the night's revelations. The letter had been a masterstroke, but the attack on Silas suggested desperation. Whoever had betrayed Clara feared exposure, and Poirot's trap would force their hand. He adjusted his mustache, satisfied that the night had ended with a step closer to justice. The story of Clara Ashburn was not over, but tonight Hercule Poirot had brought her back from the shadows. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The air in Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with suspicion, as if the very walls of the ancient estate conspired to guard their secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand drawing-room, his small, fastidious figure a stark contrast to the opulent chaos of velvet drapes and gilded furniture. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows that danced across the polished oak floor, mimicking the unease that gripped the gathered occupants. The family, Roland, Clara, Edmund, and the enigmatic Vincent, Lyle sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions. Mr. Grayson, the lawyer, perched on the edge of an armchair, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm. The manor staff hovered at the periphery, their whispered anxieties barely audible over the crackle of the fireplace. Poirot's mustache twitched as he surveyed the room, his sharp green eyes glinting with purpose. "Mies, Amos," he began, his voice a measured cadence. "The time has come to bring this dark affair to its conclusion. The murder of Lady Beatrice Ashford, a crime most heinous, has woven a web of deceit around us all. But fear not, Hercule Poirot has unraveled its threads. One final piece of evidence, however, eludes me. Tonight, I shall lay a trap to capture the truth." A murmur rippled through the room. Roland, his youthful face pale and blotched from sleepless nights, leaned forward. "A trap? What do you mean, Monsieur Poirot? Are we to be bait in some game of yours?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience, Monsieur Roland. The guilty will reveal themselves, as they always do when pressed by the little gray cells." His gaze flicked to Clara, whose porcelain features remained impassive, though her fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. Edmund, slouched in a corner, avoided Poirot's eyes, his pipe unlit and forgotten in his hand. Vincent Lyle, the latecomer claiming kinship, sat with an air of detached amusement, as if the proceedings were a theatrical performance staged for his benefit. Strumming fingers stilled, his brow furrowing. "Tonight," Poirot continued, "I shall place a certain document in the library, a letter that holds the key to Lady Beatrice's death. The one who seeks to destroy it will betray their guilt. I suggest you all retire early and reflect upon your actions. The truth, it has a way of emerging." Nan, Clara's lips parted, but no sound came. Edmund coughed, a harsh, grating sound, while Roland's eyes darted toward the door. Lyle merely smiled, a faint curl of his lips that Poirot noted with interest. The detective bowed slightly and excused himself, his polished shoes clicking on the floor as he exited, leaving a charged silence in his wake. Outside, the Yorkshire moors stretched into the twilight, their rolling shadows swallowing the last of the day's light. Poirot made his way to the library, cave in his room lined with leather-bound tomes and dominated by the great oak desk where Beatrice's body had been found. The air carried the faint scent of old paper and wax, tinged with the memory of violence. Poirot's movements were deliberate as he produced a folded letter from his pocket, a carefully crafted forgery, written in his own meticulous hand to mimic Beatrice's elegant script. It accused no one directly, but hinted at knowledge of the scandal that had haunted her family. A scandal, Poirot now believed, centered on Edmund's role in her late husband's disgrace. He placed the letter inside a book of poetry, spine, warned from frequent handling, and tucked it onto a shelf near the hidden passage he had discovered days earlier. The passage, concealed behind a panel, had been the key to the locked room mystery. Okay, and Poirot suspected it would play a role tonight. He adjusted the book so its title was slightly askew, a detail only a guilty eye would notice. Then, with a nod to the constable, a burly man named Harris, who waited in the corridor, Poirot retreated to a shadowed alcove near the library's entrance, where a velvet curtain offered concealment. "Constable Harris," Poirot whispered, "you will remain here. We watch the door, but do not intervene unless I signal. The guilty one will come, and we must catch them in the act." Harris nodded, his broad face set with determination. "Right, sir. I'll keep my eyes peeled." Poirot settled into the alcove, his small frame blending into the darkness. The manor was silent now, save for the distant creak of floorboards and the moan of the wind across the moors. Time stretched, each minute heavy with anticipation. Poirot's mind, however, was far from idle. He replayed the case's intricacies, Beatrice's diary, with its veiled references to a shadow from the past. The coded letter in Lyle's possession, hinting at a buried scandal. Clara's secret correspondence with Lyle, Key, and Edmund's evasions, which had grown more pronounced since Elsie's poisoning. The maid, now recovering, had confirmed Clara and Lyle's plotting, but Poirot sensed a deeper truth. His slip with Grayson's inkblot had been no accidental deliberate misstep to lull the true culprit into complacency. Hours passed, the grandfather clock in the hall tolling midnight. Poirot's eyes, accustomed to the dimness, caught a flicker of movement at the library door. A figure slipped inside, their silhouette, tall and lean, moving with cautious precision. Poirot's pulse quickened, but he remained still, his breath shallow. The figure approached the shelf, their hand hesitating before pulling the poetry book free. The faint rustle of paper followed as the letter was extracted. Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Edmund. You have found my little bait, I see." Edmund froze, the letter clutched in his hand, his face a mask of shock in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Poirot, I was merely attempting to destroy evidence, Nan." Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were steel. He signaled to Harris, who emerged from the corridor, blocking the exit. "You will explain, monsieur, why you felt compelled to retrieve a letter you should not know exists." Edmund's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him. "You don't understand, Poirot. I had to protect myself. Beatrice, she knew too much about the past, about what I did." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching. "The scandal of her husband's affair, perhaps? The one that produced an heir you wished to keep hidden. You feared Beatrice would expose your ruin. You're standing. So you killed her, using this secret passage to stage a locked room murder." Edmund's eyes widened, his pipe slipping from his fingers to clatter on the floor. "How did you? The little gray cells, monsieur? They do not rest." Poirot stepped closer, his voice low but relentless. "You argued with Beatrice that night. The maid, Elsie, overheard. When she became a threat, you poisoned her tea, though you miscalculated the dose. The letter in your hand was my creation, but your presence here confirms your guilt." Edmund's face crumpled, his voice a hoarse whisper. "She was going to tell everyone about the money I took, the lies I told to cover it up. I couldn't let her destroy me." Harris moved forward, his handcuffs glinting in the moonlight. "Edmund Ashford, you're under arrest for the murder of Lady Beatrice." Ashford. As Harris led Edmund away, Poirot lingered in the library, his mind turning to the remaining threads. Clara's role, Lyle's true intentions, the all pieces of a puzzle that would be resolved tomorrow. For now, The trap had sprung, and the primary culprit was caught. But Poirot knew the final act awaited, a denouement that would lay bare every secret Blackthorn Manor held. The night deepened, the manor settling into an uneasy quiet. Poirot returned to his room, his mind already preparing for the morning's confrontation. The case was nearly closed, but the truth, like the moors outside, was vast and unpredictable. Tea would be ready. Chapter 10. Poirot's rare slip. The morning sun cast a golden glow over Blackthorn Manor's sprawling gardens, where Hercule Poirot stood, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the dewiest grass. The air carried the faint scent of roses, mingling with the crispness of autumn. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his hat, his brow furrowed as he surveyed the estate's now quiet facade. The events of the past days, the poisoning of Lady Evelyn Blackthorn, the missing will, the hidden passages, and the unmasking of the solicitor, Mr. Grayson, as the murderer had left an indelible mark on the manor's once inviting halls. Yet, for Poirot, the case was not quite closed. There was a final reckoning to be had, not with the suspects, but with himself. Mon ami, Poirot began, his voice soft but deliberate. You have observed, no doubt, that Hercule Poirot is not infallible. A rare slip, a momentary lapse of the little gray cells nearly cost us the truth in this affair. Hastings turned, his eyes widening. A slip, Poirot. I'd say you were brilliant. You caught Grayson red-handed, recovered the jade figurine, and ensured Lady Evelyn's fortune went to the museum, just as she intended. What slip could there possibly be? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Patience, Hastings. All will be revealed. Let us walk, and I shall recount the final threads of this intricate tapestry. They strolled toward the garden's centerpiece, a marble fountain carved with cherubs, its water sparkling in the sunlight. Poirot's hands were clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly as if listening to the whispers of the manor itself. The case had been one of his most perplexing, not because of its complexity, but because of his own oversight, a misstep that had nearly allowed Grayson's quiet cunning to slip through his grasp. The previous evening had been a whirlwind. Poirot had gathered the guests in the manor's grand drawing room, its walls lined with portraits of Blackthorn ancestors, their stern gazes seeming to judge the living. Charles, the indebted nephew, sat slumped in an armchair, his face pale. Margaret, the secretive secretary, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Lucas Hale, the archaeologist, stood by the fireplace, his fingers tracing the edge of a mantelpiece as if seeking an artifact. Beatrice Voss, the volatile playwright, paced near the windows, her red scarf trailing like a comet's tail. And Mr. Grayson, the solicitor, sat composed, his spectacles glinting under the chandelier's light. Poirot had paced before them, his voice cutting through the tension. Mesdames et messieurs, the murderer of Lady Evelyn Blackthorn is among us. The poison in her tea, the missing will, the stolen jade figurine, all point to a mind both calculating and desperate. But Hercule Poirot has set a trap, and the guilty party has fallen into it. He had paused, letting the silence weigh on them. The jade figurine, so coveted, has been found, and upon it we shall find the fingerprints of the killer. This was a lie, of course a ruse, to provoke a reaction. The figurine was still missing, but Poirot had watched Grayson's face closely. The solicitor's composure cracked, his hand twitching toward his pocket. Moments later, he bolted for the door, only to be intercepted by the local constable, summoned earlier by Poirot's foresight. A search of Grayson's coat revealed a vial of cyanide, identical to the poison that killed Evelyn. His luggage, hastily packed, yielded the jade figurine, its green surface gleaming with secrets. Grayson's confession had followed, extracted under Poirot's relentless questioning. He had poisoned Evelyn to prevent her from signing the new will, which would have exposed his embezzlement of her funds. The figurine, he admitted, was meant for a black market buyer, a final act of greed to fund his escape. The unsigned will, found beneath the garden sundial, ensured the museum would receive Evelyn's fortune, as no valid prior will existed. Now, in the garden, Poirot stopped by the sundial, its shadow pointing like an accusatory finger. "You see, Hastings," he said, "Grayson was the shadow in this affair, quiet, unassuming, always in the background. I nearly overlooked him, focusing on the louder motives: Charles's debts, Beatrice's vendetta, Hale's obsession with artifacts. It was a slip, a failure to consider the man who moved unnoticed." Hastings frowned, kicking a pebble. "But you didn't overlook him, Poirot. You suspected him enough to set that trap. Surely that's a triumph, not a slip." Poirot shook his head, his eyes distant. "Non, mon ami. The triumph came late. For days, I allowed Grayson's ordinariness to shield him. The little gray cells, they were distracted by the flamboyance of others. It was only when I returned to Evelyn's note, 'The key lies in the shadow,' that I realized she spoke, not only of the sundial, but of the man who lurked in her trust." He gestured toward the manor. "Let us sit, Hastings, in the conservatory. There, I shall explain how this case was resolved, and how Poirot learned a lesson in humility." They entered the conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with exotic plants. Orchids bloomed in vibrant purples, their fragrance mingling with the earthy scent of ferns. Poirot settled into a wicker chair, his fingers steepled. Hastings sat opposite, his notebook open, ever eager to record his friend's deductions. "Consider, Hastings," Poirot began, "the complexity of human nature. Each guest had a motive, a secret. Charles, with his gambling debts, feared disinheritance. Beatrice, scarred by a scandal Evelyn knew, sought revenge. Dr. Hale coveted the figurine for its historical value, perhaps enough to kill. Margaret, loyal yet secretive, knew the manor's hidden passages. Grayson was different. He was the trusted solicitor, the man who drafted Evelyn's wills, who knew her finances intimately. He was invisible, and therein lay his power." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes bright. Evelyn's death was no impulse. The poison, cyanide, was administered in her tea, in a locked study. The cup vanished, a clever touch to delay suspicion. The will, hidden beneath the sundial, was unsigned, shoring her old will favoring Grayson's interests, remained in effect. The figurine, stolen not for its value, but to distract, was a miscalculation. Grayson underestimated Poirot. Hastings nodded, scribbling furiously. "But how did you know it was Grayson? What tipped you off?" Poirot's smile was wry. "A small thing, Hastings, a discrepancy. Grayson claimed he was in his room when Evelyn died, but Margaret mentioned seeing him near the study earlier. A lie, small but significant. Then his spectacles, always polished, yet smudged that night, as if he had been in a dusty place. The secret passage, you see, was filled with cobwebs. I tested him with the figurine, and his panic betrayed him. Tea." Paused, sipping tea brought by the manor's housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, who had remained loyal to Evelyn's memory. The tea was fragrant, a reminder of the poisoned cup that had sparked this mystery. The conserve, fittingly, the conversation turned to the manor's history. "Blackthorn Manor has seen many tragedies," Poirot said. "Avala's great uncle, a smuggler, was murdered in that very study a century ago. The locals say the house is cursed." "Cursed?" Hastings asked, raising an eyebrow. "An exaggeration, perhaps," Poirot replied. "But its secret passages, hidden compartments, suggest a family accustomed to deception. Grayson knew this, had been served the Blackthorns for years. He used the passage to enter the study unseen. He recounted the night of the murder. Grayson, familiar with the manor's layout from years of handling Evelyn's affairs, had slipped through the passage, poured cyanide into her tea, and locked the door from the inside before escaping. The missing cup was a distraction, hidden to confuse the police. The will, unsigned, was a desperate attempt to preserve his control over Evelyn's estate. But the figurine, Hastings said. Why steal it? Red herring, Poirot said. Grayson planned to sell it, to fund his escape. He knew its value from Hale's discussions. Plot. He hid it poorly in his luggage, where I suspected it would be. The conservatory's glass walls reflected the morning light, casting patterns on Poirot's face. He looked contemplative, almost vulnerable. This case, Hastings, reminded me that even Poirot can err. I assumed the killer would be bold, dramatic. Grayson was neither. He was a shadow, and I nearly missed him. Hastings closed his notebook. But you didn't, Poirot. You solved it. The museum gets the fortune, Grayson's in custody, and the figurine's back where it belongs. I'd call that a success. Poirot chuckled softly. But success tempered by humility. The little gray cells must never rest, lest they falter again. They rose, leaving the conservatory for the manor's driveway, where a car awaited, to take them to the station. The other guests had departed: Charles, to face his creditors; Beatrice, to rewrite her latest play; Hale, to his dig sites; Margaret, to a new job. The manor stood silent, its secrets laid bare. As they drove away, Poirot gazed at the passing countryside. Hastings, he said, the world is full of shadows. You must always seek the light. Hastings smiled. And you always find it, old chap? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Perhaps, mon ami. Perhaps. The train to London rattled through the Devon hills, and Poirot sat by the window, his mind at ease. The case was closed, the puzzle solved. Yet the memory of his rare slip lingered, a quiet reminder that even the great Hercule Poirot was human. The manor faded into the distance, its mysteries resolved, its cursive, it ever had one lifted. Chapter 11. A new puzzle in Paris. Hercule Poirot adjusted his perfectly knotted tie. The crisp Parisian morning air brushing against his meticulously groomed mustache. He stood outside the Café de la Lune, a charming yet unassuming establishment, tucked in a quiet corner of Montmartre. The invitation had arrived at his apartment the previous evening, a delicate envelope, sealed with sapphire blue wax, requesting his presence at precisely 10 o'clock. The sender, a certain Madame Alice Dubois, promised a matter of utmost intrigue, worthy of your unparalleled mind. Poirot, ever susceptible to flattery and mystery, could not resist. The cafe's interior was a mosaic of elegance and eccentricity. Crystal chandeliers hung above tables draped in crimson cloth, while an old gramophone played a soft melody of Debussy. Madame Dubois awaited him at a corner table, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes sharp as cut glass. She was flanked by 3 others, a young man with a nervous twitch, a woman in an emerald green hat who fidgeted with her gloves, and an older gentleman whose stern demeanor suggested a military past. Poirot bowed slightly, his gaze sweeping over the group. Monsieur Poirot, Madame Dubois began, her voice low and melodic. I am grateful you accepted my invitation. We are in dire need of your genius. A crime has been committed, one that defies logic and threatens ruin. Poirot raised an eyebrow, settling into a chair with the grace of a cat. A crime, madame? Pray, enlighten me. What is this affair that so troubles you? Madame Dubois leaned forward, her fingers tracing the rim of a porcelain teacup. It concerns the sapphire of Saint Denis, a gem of incalculable value, stolen from my family's vault 2 nights ago. The thief left no trace, save for a single clue, a poem written in crimson ink, mocking our loss. She slid a folded parchment across the table. Poirot unfolded it, his eyes scanning the elegant script. In shadows deep, where secrets sleep, the sapphire gleams. No more to keep, seek not the lock, nor key, nor door, for I am gone, and yours no more. Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. A poetical thief, how charming. Yet, Madame, you have not told me why this gathering. Who are these companions of yours? Madame Dubois introduced them. Julien Moreau, her nephew, a painter with debts as vibrant as his canvases. Mademoiselle Claire Lefebvre, a journalist whose recent expose on gem smuggling had caused a stir. And Colonel Henry Valmont, a family friend and former curator of the Louvre's antiquities. Each nodded curtly, their expressions a mix of suspicion and unease. The vault, Madame Dubois continued, was impenetrable, locked with a mechanism designed by my late husband, a master engineer. Only the four of us knew its combination. Yet the sapphire is gone, and I fear one among us is not what they seem. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A puzzle, then, a locked room, a stolen treasure, and a circle of suspects. T.R.S. Interestant. Shall require access to the vault, and your permission to question each of you. The little gray cells, they're already at work. The chapter's opening scene set a brisk pace, with Poirot diving into the mystery. He visited the Dubois estate, a grand mansion overlooking the Seine, where the vault lay hidden beneath the marble statue of Saint Denis. The mechanism was a marvel, a series of dials and levers, untouched by force, yet the sapphire was gone. Poirot noted the absence of dust on one dial, suggesting recent tampering, but the combination remained intact. Over the next day, Poirot conducted interviews, each revealing layers of motive. Julien, the nephew, admitted to selling family heirlooms to fund his art, swore he'd never touch the sapphire, his mother's legacy. Claire, the journalist, revealed she'd been investigating a black market gem ring, and the sapphire's theft might be retaliation. Colonel Valmont, gruff and evasive, spoke of a rival collector who coveted the gem. But his alibi late-night card game lacked witnesses. As Poirot pieced together their stories, a second clue emerged: a tiny sapphire chip found in the garden, near a fountain shaped like a serpent. The chip matched the stolen gem's cut, but its placement seemed deliberate, as if taunting the investigator. Poirot's suspicions deepened when he learned Madame Dubois had recently updated her will, naming Julien as the sole heir. Detail Claire had uncovered for her expose. Much to Julien's fury, the narrative wove through Paris's underbelly, as Poirot followed a lead to a smoky cabaret where gem smugglers were rumored to meet. Disguised in a modest overcoat, he overheard whispers of a shadow broker orchestrating high-profile thefts. A dancer, overhearing his inquiries, slipped him a note: "The serpent guards the truth." Poirot returned to the mansion, examining the fountain, where he discovered a hidden compartment containing a coded ledger. The ledger listed transactions tied to the sapphire, implicating an unknown fifth party. Back at the cafe, Poirot confronted the group, revealing the ledger. Tensions flared as accusations flew. Julien accused Claire of planting evidence to boost her career. Claire pointed to Valmont's secretive past. Valmont suggested Madame Dubois herself staged the theft for insurance. Poirot.com, amidst the storm, noted a discrepancy in the ledger's dates, suggesting the theft was planned months ago. For Claire's expose arrest emerged when Poirot revisited the vault, noticing a faint scent of lavender perfume only Claire wore. Yet her alibi held. She'd been at a press gala the night of the theft, confirmed by photographs. Poirot's mind raced, considering a double, a twin, or a clever impersonation. He requested police records, uncovering a forgotten detail. Claire had a sister, Elod, presumed dead but recently spotted in Paris. The climax unfolded at a masquerade ball hosted by Madame Dubois, where Poirot orchestrated a trap. He announced the sapphire had been recovered to land. Watch the guests' reactions. A masked figure bolted, only to be caught by Poirot's hired constables. Unmasked, it was Elodie, Claire's sister, alive and working with the shadow broker. She confessed to infiltrating the mansion using Claire's identity to access the vault, while the real Claire was unaware. In a final gathering, Poirot explained the solution. Elodie, trained in lockpicking, bypassed the vault's mechanism, leaving the poem to taunt her sister's journalistic pursuits. The sapphire was recovered from a smuggler's den, and Elodie faced justice. Madame Dubois thanked Poirot, offering him a sapphire pendant, which he politely declined, sparing the satisfaction of a case solved. As Poirot strolled along the Seine, the city's lights reflecting on the water, he mused on the human heart's capacity for deception. The case, though complex, had yielded to his method. He tipped his hat to a passing couple, content with the triumph of his little gray cells. And the story closed with Paris fading into the night at definitive, satisfying end. Chapter 12. The masked summons. Hercule Poirot stood on the balcony of his London flat, the autumn breeze carrying the faint hum of the city. Its morning reverie was interrupted by a courier delivering a velvet-lined envelope sealed with a wax crest depicting a masked figure. K. The note inside, penned in flowing script, invited him to a masquerade ball at Ravenwood Hall, sprawling estate in the Cotswolds, hosted by the enigmatic Lady Beatrice Langley. The invitation promised a night of revelry and revelation, with a cryptic postscript: "One guest will not leave as they came." Intrigued by the veiled threat, Poirot packed his finest evening attire and boarded a train to the countryside, his little gray cells tingling with anticipation. Ravenwood Hall was a vision of Gothic grandeur, its turrets piercing the twilight sky. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, and guests in elaborate masks swirled to a haunting waltz. Lady Beatrice, her face hidden behind a silver peacock mask, greeted Poirot with a knowing smile. "Monsieur Poirot, your presence honors us. Tonight, we play a game of truths, but beware, some truths are deadly." She introduced the key players: Victor Crane, a charismatic financier with a questionable fortune; Isabelle Durand, a French soprano whose recent scandal had silenced her career; Dr. Leonard Bryce, a reclusive botanist obsessed with rare orchids; and Thomas Langley, Beatrice's estranged brother, whose sudden return from India raised eyebrows. Each guest, Poirot noted, wore a mask that seemed to conceal more than their face. As the ball commenced, Lady Beatrice announced a peculiar challenge. A locked chest in the library contained a document that would change one life forever. The key, she said, was hidden somewhere in the hall, and the guests were invited to find it. Poirot, sensing a deeper motive, declined to join the hunt, instead observing the guests' interactions. Victor's charm masked a calculating edge. Isabel's laughter rang hollow. Dr. Bryce clutched a notebook as if it were a lifeline. And Thomas's furtive glances suggested unease. At midnight, a scream shattered the revelry. The chest was open, its contents a single sheet of paper. In the library, Dr. Bryce lay slumped over a table, a glass of champagne spilled beside him, his pulse faint. Poirot examined the scene. No wounds, but a faint bitter mind scent suggested cyanide. The doctor was rushed to a guest room, barely alive, as Poirot declared, "This is no accident, Ms. Amos. A crime has been committed, and the key to the chest is but a piece of the puzzle." Poirot's investigation began with the chest, its lock unforced, suggesting someone had found the key. He discovered a hidden compartment in the library's fireplace containing a silk ribbon stained with ink. The ribbon matched Isabel's gown, but she claimed it was torn during a dance. Victor, meanwhile, admitted to overhearing Dr. Bryce arguing with Thomas about a debt earlier that evening. Thomas denied it, but his trembling hands betrayed him. Lady Beatrice, oddly serene, revealed the document was a codicil to her will, naming a new heir effect only her lawyer and Thomas knew the next day. Poirot explored Ravenwood's grounds, finding a greenhouse where Dr. Bryce cultivated his orchids. Among the plants, he discovered a vial of cyanide, cleverly hidden in a hollowed-out stem. The botanist, now recovering, claimed it was for pest control, but Poirot noted his expertise in toxins. A groundskeeper reported seeing a masked figure near the greenhouse at dusk, carrying a lantern. Poirot's suspicions deepened when he found a burned scrap of the codicil in the fireplace, its fragments mentioning India and inheritance. In a bold move, Poirot organized a second ball, announcing the codicil had been recovered, a ruse to flush out the culprit. He instructed the staff to watch for unusual behavior. During the waltz, Isabel slipped away, and Poirot followed her to a hidden chapel in the estate's west wing. There, she was rifling through a prayer book where the real codicil was concealed. Confronted, she confessed to stealing it, fearing it disinherited her lover, Thomas. But she denied poisoning Bryce, insisting she'd only meant to protect their future. Poirot's inquiries took him to London, where he met a retired colonial officer who knew Thomas from India. The officer revealed that Thomas had been involved in a smuggling ring, using orchids to conceal stolen gems. Dr. Bryce, a former accomplice, had blackmailed Thomas to secure his silence. Poirot returned to Ravenwood, piecing together the motive. Thomas poisoned Bryce to protect his secrets, then stole the codicil to ensure his inheritance. In a dramatic denouement in the ballroom, Poirot unmasked Thomas as the culprit. He explained how Thomas used his knowledge of Bryce's habits to lace his champagne with cyanide, stolen from the greenhouse. The ribbon was a misdirection, planted to implicate Isabel. The codicil, Poirot revealed, named Victor as Beatrice's heir, as she suspected Thomas's criminal past. Thomas lunged for the door, but constables, alerted by Poirot, apprehended him. As the guests departed, Lady Beatrice thanked Poirot, offering him a rare orchid, which he accepted with a bow. Walking through Ravenwood's gardens, Poirot reflected on the masks people wear, literal and figurative. The case, with its layers of deceit, had tested his acumen, but order had been restored. He boarded his train to London, the countryside, fading into dusk, leaving readers with a complete, satisfying resolution. Chapter 13. The Whispered Warning. Hercule Poirot adjusted his impeccable Homburg hat as he stepped onto the platform of Venice's Santa Lucia station, the salty breeze of the lagoon mingling with the scent of espresso from a nearby cafe. It was October 1925, and Poirot had received an urgent telegram from Signor Matteo Rossi, renowned Venetian art dealer, requesting his presence at the Palazzo Serenissima. The message was cryptic. A shadow threatens my legacy. Only a genius can save it. Come at once. Never one to resist a puzzle wrapped in urgency, Poirot had boarded the Orient Express. Arriving in Venice with his curiosity piqued and his little gray cells primed, the Palazzo Serenissima loomed over a quiet canal, its faded grandeur a testament to centuries of secrets. Signor Rossi, a wiry man with silver-streaked hair and eyes that darted like a hunted animal, greeted Poirot in a frescoed salon. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice trembling, "I am a man marked by fate. My collection, priceless artifacts, paintings, manuscripts, has been targeted. Last night, a thief stole the Crimson Veil, a 15th century tapestry said to conceal a cipher to a lost fortune." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A tapestry, Signor? Is it cipher? Why is it so?" "Coveted." Rossi produced a sketch of the veil, a crimson fabric embroidered with gold threads forming intricate patterns of roses and ravens. "Legend says it hides directions to a Medici treasure encoded by a master cryptographer. The thief left this in its place. He handed Poirot a small card inscribed with a riddle. Beneath the raven's wing, the rose does sing in moonlight's glow. The truth takes wing. Seek not the gold, but the tale untold. For secret sleep where waters fold. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A poetic thief, T.R.'s curio. Who else resides in this palazzo, signor? Rossi introduced the household. Lucia Bellini, his ambitious niece and apprentice, whose knowledge of art rivaled his own. Giovanni Falco, a brooding restorer with a murky past. Signora Adriana Vesper, a wealthy patron with a penchant for rare manuscripts. And Father Lorenzo, a Jesuit scholar cataloging Rossi's collection. Each, Poirot noted, had access to the gallery where the veil was displayed. The investigation began in the gallery, a vaulted chamber lit by flickering sconces. The tapestry's frame was undisturbed, the lock unforced, suggesting an insider's hand. Poirot found a single gold thread caught in a floorboard, its sheen matching the veil's embroidery. Questioning Lucia, he learned she'd been working late in the gallery. But her alibi, a sketchbook filled with drawings, seemed too perfect, the ink still wet. Giovanni, meanwhile, admitted to restoring a nearby painting, but claimed ignorance of the theft, though his calloused hands trembled. Signora Vesper spoke of a rival collector, Don Marco, who coveted Rossi's treasures, while Father Lorenzo hinted at a curse tied to the veil, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. That evening, as gondolas glided silently outside, a second incident shook the palazzo. A scream led Poirot to the library, where Signora Vesper clutched a bloodied letter opener standing over a shattered vase. She claimed an intruder had attacked her, but Poirot noted the absence of footprints in the dust. The library shelves held a clue, a book on Medici ciphers, its pages marked with annotations in crimson ink. Poirot deduced the theft was a diversion, the real target being the cipher solution. Venturing into Venice's labyrinthine alleys, Poirot visited a canal-side antiquarian who confirmed Don Marco's interest in the veil. A tip led him to a crumbling church where he found a hidden cache of letters linking Giovanni to a smuggling ring. The letters mentioned a raven's nest, a code Poirot suspected tied to the riddle. Back at the palazzo, he examined the gallery's chandelier, shaped like a raven, and discovered a concealed compartment holding a fragment of the veil, embroidered with a map of Venice's canals. The plot thickened when Lucia vanished, leaving a note claiming she'd fled to protect the family's honor. Poirot, skeptical, traced her to a masked festival in Piazza San Marco, disguised in a black domino. He spotted her exchanging a package with a cloaked figure. Interrupting, he uncovered a fake tapestry, a decoy to mislead Don Marco. Lucia confessed she'd hidden the real veil, fearing Giovanni's betrayal, but denied knowing the cipher's meaning. Poirot orchestrated a trap at the palazzo's annual ball, announcing the veil's recovery to provoke the thief. As guests danced in masked splendor, Father Lorenzo slipped into the crypt beneath the palazzo, where Poirot caught him decoding the cipher on a stolen fragment. Confronted, the priest admitted to orchestrating the theft, driven by a vow to return the Medici treasure to the church. He'd used Giovanni's smuggling contacts to stage the theft, planting the riddle to mislead Rossi in a candlelit denouement. Poirot gathered the household, revealing Father Lorenzo's scheme. Cipher, he explained, pointed to a sunken vault beneath the Grand Canal, accessible only by decoding the veil's patterns. The tapestry was recovered, and Lorenzo faced arrest, his scholarly facade shattered. Rossi, grateful, offered Poirot a Venetian glass pendant, which he declined, preferring the clarity of a solved mystery. As Poirot glided through Venice's canals, the city's reflections shimmering like secrets, he mused on the masks of ambition. In faith, the case, with its tangled motives, had challenged his method, but his little gray cells had prevailed. The story closed with Poirot sipping espresso at a canal-side cafe. Venice's mystery fading into the mist, a complete, satisfying end.